Okay, and we're live. All right. Welcome everyone to this Mass Effect Starfield slash Star Wars Outlaws podcast, where I'm joined today by the amazing content creator in Andrew, who just like me loves everything sci-fi related, and his main beats are Halo, Mass Effect, Half-Life. Am I correct?
Yep.
And The Witcher. Not a sci-fi game, but I think what it says is you just love these rich open worlds, just like me, right?
Oh yeah, RPG fan all the way.
Yeah, that's kind of pretty much what this channel is. It's been very RPG focused with a heavy emphasis on Mass Effect, just simply because it was the first RPG game. Well, let me not say that. It was the first game that made me really fall in love with RPGs. Yeah, let's just put it that way. All the decision making, you can attack this person, do this. If you do this, there's repercussions. And prior to that, I don't think I really played a game where I felt as invested in these characters. And you?
Yeah, same here. Mass Effect was my first true RPG. I can't really think of anything prior. I guess this is not an RPG, but I wonder if the catalyst of me getting interested in choice consequence type stuff was ironically from Black Ops 2. That game was linear, but it had some choices, and I wonder that may have been when I got into Mass Effect 2, not long after that. That was my first RPG.
Black Ops 2 had RPG elements in it.
Yeah, it did. It had like alternate branching paths, multiple endings. Choices you make in one moment would affect outcomes in the next mission. So not an RPG by any means, but that I definitely played that before I got into RPGs. I'm kind of wondering if that was where I got interested in it.
Yeah, it all pretty much starts from somewhere, and even I'm a huge sci-fi guy, and it wasn't even games that got me into sci-fi. It was Neil deGrasse Tyson, watching the Discovery Channel, watching all this universe documentaries, and what's a gamma ray burst, how planets black holes, and my mind was just blown about the endless possibilities. And for me in particular, the reason why I gravitated to sci-fi is because it's real, right? It's possible. Whereas fantasy is just pure. It's fiction. You're not going to see elves. you're not going to see dwarves. You're going to get magic. But can you get a wormhole that's going to send you somewhere else? Yeah, you can. So that's how I kind of fell in love with sci-fi. And then a Mass Effect obviously just took that to the next level, because now you've taken that world and you're giving me stories to explore. I'm a kid. My mind is quite limited in terms of interactions with aliens and how that could happen. But then when you get your Drews and your Caseys, they're like, yeah, listen, we've been falling in love with this for a long time, so we have that experience, and now we're gonna tell it to you. And yeah, Mass Effect completely blew me away. Also Star Wars. I'm not crazy about it from the fact that it's just not it's not a grounded sci-fi.
Right, more of a fantasy, sci-fi.
It's more fantasy. Yeah, I wasn't really into the whole Chosen One kind of thing. But whatever. It's still good. But listen, we have a lot to talk about. Starfield, Mass Effect, Star Wars, even some Dragon Age. I don't play too much, but so I'm hoping you can carry that conversation. But I do got some questions for you on that, because the trailer did look interesting. But I think we'll start off with Mass Effect, because that seems to be a talk that's my favorite discussion. It's probably yours as well. So
yeah,
let's hit off with that. So the first point I'll say is, when did problems for Bioware truly start? I've heard people say Dragon Age, Inquisition. I've heard people say Mass Effect 3. I've heard people say it happened when Casey Hudson and Drew left, and I've heard people say it was Andromeda. For you, when do you think the problem started to show?
For me, I would say probably Dragon Age Inquisition. That game still had that Bioware spirit to it, but I think it started to wane, and they were kind of going in this other more open world direction, but minus the branching narrative that you'd come to expect from a Bioware game. Of course, it was there, but I did think it was a step down. And also the open world thing on the Frostbite engine, it seemed very barren.
Hmm.
And same goes for Andromeda. Like there wasn't much interactivity. There weren't many. The worlds felt kind of empty, and
Yeah.
I think that problem carried over to Andromeda, where it was much more noticeable. But Dragon Age seems to be the initial crack in the armor, so to speak.
You know what's interesting is because you say Dragon Age, which some people do agree with you, but wasn't Inquisition one of the best selling Dragon Age games as well?
It was.
Hmm.
I think that could have been just jumping off of the
The
hype from
previous.
Mass Effect 3. Yeah,
Okay.
even though Mass Effect 3 was controversial in its own right, I think it wasn't enough to kill to basically ruin the momentum BioWare had. I
Hmm.
think Inquisition still sold well because it was a decent game and it was a BioWare game. So,
You know, something else I've noticed is a lot of the times the fan base can be at odds with what the actual majority is feeling, right? So, for example, I look at The Witcher 3. For me, the best Witcher game is The Witcher 2 by far.
mhm,
I think the gameplay is better. I think there was a feel, a cadence with The Witcher 2 that was perfect. And then they came out with The Witcher 3 and they streamlined the gameplay. They made it more casual friendly. The Witcher 2 was hard. It was a
yeah,
difficult game to play. And I'm playing The Witcher 3 and I'm thinking, why is okay, it's a good game, the story's all right, but like it just didn't have that same effect to me. I wasn't crazy about it. But The
interesting.
Witcher 3 is the best selling Witcher game. It's what brought them to the masses. And a lot of people who I know play Dragon Age, Inquisition is what they played, and Inquisition is the game that they actually love. So I think Bioware kind of runs this line of, do we go back further than Inquisition and appeal to those fans? Or do we do what the mass of our fans are saying?
Right.
You know, Mass Effect 3 was a lot more streamlined than the previous games as well. Um, so what game do we want? Do we want a Mass Effect 2 like game or Mass Effect 3 like game? But before we actually go into what a Mass Effect 4 game could be and how they even put that story together, I agree with you with Andromeda. I actually think Andromeda is one of the how can I say this without trying to make it seem like I'm trying to, cause drama.
Mhm.
Andromeda is one of the Andromeda has so much potential. That's it. The idea of um the Milky Way races going to a different galaxy in itself has so much potential with story.
Yeah.
How do humans who have had issues with Krogans, potential Quarians, Turians, Asaris, how do these group of people who are all different in themselves interact with a whole different galaxy of different people?
Right.
Who leads? Who's in control? How does the biology of this aliens, whatever, who they take from different races, the best parts of different races to create like the ultimate race. That concept is so interesting. What is the story? What is their religion? How do they mate? How do the people feel?
Right.
Are other versions of Ket who haven't evolved yet or so, are they seen as lower class citizens? That's, to me, that's so much potential. Then you have the Angaras, who were, spoiler, created by a whole different, this changes like their whole concept of life.
Mhm.
Interesting story again. And then even the smaller details, the benefactor, what's going on there. The idea of not Edie,
Uh,
Sam,
yep.
the idea of organics and synthetics merging together to work together to be something better. That, so much potential, and they threw it all away.
I know. I know. On paper, it sounds amazing. And when I first heard about Andromeda, I was under the assumption that, and maybe I set myself up for a little bit of disappointment, but
Mhm.
I was kind of under the assumption that the Andromeda galaxy would be more vast. It would have more civilizations established cities like like Ilium in Mass Effect 2, but
Hmm.
in its own way, in its own unique architecture, maybe very foreign looking, old, maybe like the Forerunners in Halo, like some crazy stuff, which we did get actually with the vaults. It kind of reminded me of some of those Halo Forerunner elements, but I just thought it was very small in scope. You had that one little cluster, and I was kind of expecting a little bit more than what we actually ended up getting.
Yeah.
Same way as you.
100%. I was Mass Effect Andromeda taught me something very valuable. Wait for a proper release. I felt that game, even though it was so crazy to play it, I wish they would have just delayed it for like 2 years, because I
Yeah.
think we would have got something better. However, I don't know if they would have fixed the actual story. If you tell me that you're going to change the narrative, the story, then I'm perfectly fine with that. Um, Even something else I forgot, even the idea of the Quarians even not arriving. So now you have this other group of people from Milky Way arriving in Andromeda. Like just so many stories you could tell.
Yep.
I think it shows that management is really, really important in making these games. You can't, because they had 5 years or so to make that game,
Hmm.
and I think what they produce only came out in the last 2 years or so.
Yep.
So that shows that, hey, listen, they can actually make a good quality game if they had great leadership, and that was the problem. They didn't have great leadership. They didn't know what they were doing. They wanted to go for this No Man's Sky kind of vibe, with different planets. That didn't work out, and we kind of see that with these barren locations. So, um, so overall, Andromeda was a disappointment, but it was a good game. I don't think it was a bad game. I don't think it was an average game. I think it was slightly above average. I think there was things about it that was really cool. I think the combat was great.
Hmm.
Um, but I think we can go on to the main topic here, which is Mass Effect 4. Um, Before we talk about how you tie this story together, you as a Mass Effect fan, um, how does Bioware straddle this line of making a game that the fans want? The core fans, Mass Effect 3, Mass Effect 2.
Right.
But at the same time, elevating Mass Effect and modernizing it in a 2025 or 2026 setting. Do they go open world? Do they keep the Andromeda gameplay? What do they do that isn't exactly rehashing what Mass Effect 3 is? Or are you gonna say, I don't want them to do more things. I want Mass Effect 3 with superior graphics.
Yeah. It's a tough question because I think, if you look at Baldur's Gate 3, for example, that game obviously is very well received and sold very
Mm-hmm.
well, and people weren't expecting that. It seems like a very niche type of game. There's so many choices, it can be very overwhelming, and yet it sold well. So I don't think the problem is streamlining the game. I think Andromeda's fault was that it streamlined things too much. I think we should go back the RPG, towards the RPG direction. Add a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of choices and consequences. Make it very similar to Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3. But you can add, the gameplay of Andromeda. Although I think the power wheel should come back, stuff like that. I think the way you level up your stats should be more reminiscent of the old games. But I think they could take inspiration from Andromeda, just lean a little bit more towards the RPG side. Make it semi-open world. Kind of, you can have hub worlds cater to
Mm-hmm.
the original fans who like to explore the cities. Maybe you do that. Maybe you do hub worlds and some linear missions, and a couple planets are open world. That might be a little too ambitious, but the point is, I think they should make it a mix of the two, leaning more towards the original trilogy.
Do you think we need driving in the game? The Markov?
Um, Honestly, if they go open world, yeah, I guess. But personally, I'm leaning more towards semi-open world or hubs
Mhm.
with
Okay.
linear missions.
Mhm. How about this idea of we go full renegade, like what is your take on that? Because the Mass Effect Andromeda was quite different. They gave you options. There were different kind of personalities.
Hmm.
I don't read too much. You didn't really.
Yeah.
So do you want to return back to the old system, or are you happy with what Andromeda did, except just improve on it?
I always liked the old system. I know it was sometimes very black and white. You'd pick Renegade and you'd do something terrible.
Yeah.
And same goes for Paragon. Um, but I kind of like that. Maybe if they could find a way to make it a bit more gray while still feeling like you're a renegade. Maybe
Hmm.
you have like, like they say like the term like renegon and paragade. I've heard those before. People say
Okay.
like, oh, I'm a paragon player with a little bit of renegade. Maybe they could have some choices like that are more gray, more middle. Makes the game a bit more deep. Um, I guess I like how Andromeda kind of left it a bit more open-ended to the player to interpret. But personally, the old morality system I thought was a bit more rewarding, more straightforward. Like you knew what you were gonna
Yeah.
do.
Do you think it also incentivized replays?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't. I never got the vibe with Andromeda. Like, oh, I wonder what would happen if I was sarcastic here. It
Yeah.
just wasn't as extreme as, oh, what if I punched the news reporter in the face?
Yeah. No, Andromeda was a very I can't say it felt very gray. It just felt very. It just, I don't know. I can't talk too. I don't want to talk too bad about Andromeda in some aspects because it did
Yeah,
really good things, great things. Um, and I think I've spoken to I speak to the community on Reddit a good few times. They love the game. They're really happy with the game. They recognize the game has faults, but
yeah.
I do think the game was harshly critiqued. But whenever you're comparing yourself to a game that, in many people's eyes, is a 10 out of 10, an A+ game,
Mhm.
if you fall below that, even to a level A, it's gonna be a problem. And Del Grim, thanks for commenting, man. He says empty. Andromeda largely felt empty. This is true. This is
Yep.
very true. Del Grim, he drops Mass Effect wise words every now and then.
Cool.
In the last video I dropped, he posted some theories on how things might play out, and I remember reading it, thinking, "Damn, I should have contacted this guy to like to like screen my theories because he might find the holes." But yeah, he's
Yeah.
real good now.
Cool.
Hardcore Mass Effect fan, I'll say, or maybe just a very smart guy who just sees things. But yeah, no, he's right. Andromeda felt very very empty, and that's why this idea of Mass Effect becoming a huge open world, and I guess I'll put this to you: is there anything that you've seen in a Starfield slash any sci-fi game that you've seen that you think Mass Effect, the sequel, should incorporate into it?
Any sci-fi game? Honestly, I'm trying to think. I'm leaning more towards RPGs. I'm trying to think of what sci-fi RPGs we got. There's not many. Not many Mass Effect or sci-fi RPGs out there. Um,
You
hmm.
grab onto. I mean, maybe even
No.
Fallout to an extent. Like, I think there's just some
Fallout.
RPG elements that we could take, but
Okay. I guess an easy answer would be just make the worlds have interesting places to explore. I think Bethesda games do a good job at that, where you'll go to like Boston, for example, and there's so many um, interesting areas, points of interest you want to look at. It kind of makes you go off the beaten path.
yeah,
Um, I don't know if Mass Effect is that type of game, especially if they don't go the open world route.
mhm.
But yeah, just take inspiration from Bioware in the sense of level design, more so in the older Bioware games.
Okay,
But in terms of combat and stuff, I honestly just really like Mass Effect's combat and the way they handled the stories in the old games, the pacing. That's
okay.
where Mass Effect thrived to me.
Well, before we get into the theory side of things, from a combat perspective, would you prefer a Mass Effect 3 sequel combat wise, or do you think the Andromeda way was the right path?
I think Andromeda felt really good with biotics, particularly like when you had those combos. It felt really satisfying, but I liked Mass Effect's tight shooting combat. It just felt more. I guess it kind of felt more like Gears of War in a sense, and I really liked what they were going with there. Um, if they could combine Andromeda's combos and biotics and tech abilities with Mass Effect 3's shooting mechanics, I think that would be a good combination.
I would agree. Dagrim says, I believe Mass Effect in the first three games are cumulative, like masterpiece of world building, character development, and storytelling and pacing. I agree.
Yeah,
I
same.
think the game has flaws, even with the way it connects Mass Effect 2 and 3. But I've never played a game where I'm still invested in the characters like this. When my friends tell me, "Hey, make a video on this other game or that game," I'm like, I don't care about these losers. I don't care about these games. Like, who are these characters you're speaking of? Like, do they got someone on Tally, on the Asaris? They just don't. Mass Effect, Bioware did a great job in creating this kind of timeless story.
Yeah.
Which we can talk about also from a TV perspective in terms of TV shows. I have some views on that I've kind of butt heads with people on because they don't like my answer. But sticking with the I'll go into the Mass Effect theory side of things now. BioWare painted themselves, or they kind of pushed themselves into a corner with Mass Effect 3. And we know why they went to Andromeda. It makes perfect sense. Mass Effect 3 is a bit too messy to kind of deal with.
Right.
But Andromeda didn't do what it needed to do for that franchise to keep going on. And so it makes sense to do this reset where you go back to the Milky Way. The question now is, how do you incorporate everything that happened in Mass Effect 1, 2, 3, and everything even before that, and potentially bring the Andromeda game into a story that makes sense for Mass Effect 4/5, whichever you want to call it?
Right.
How do you see them tackling that issue?
I think it's really tough. They could make a canonized ending, but I know that would divide fans. Some people have their preferred endings. I do think that the canonized ending is the ideal route, though, because it makes the stories it makes it a fresh slate for them. They can pick an ending and build off that. If they were to try to make all three endings canon, they would have to essentially make 3 different games. Otherwise, it would feel like your choices are negated. They could say the genophage was cured anyways on all 3 endings. Well, I guess they could make the genophage cure player dependent, but for example, like synthesis, like, oh, the effects of synthesis wore off. Well, then it's not really the synthesis ending anymore. It's just all conversion to one ending anyway. So I don't think they're going to implement 3 different endings. And in terms of how do they incorporate Andromeda, that's tough. I do have some theories, if you want me to get into the theories.
Fire away.
Sure. I was wondering, or I was thinking that maybe they could implement time dilation to the game. I don't know how this works in real science, but if there's a way to basically have the Milky Way timeline stay during around the Mass Effect 3 era, but also 600 years in the future with Andromeda. Now, I don't know how this will work, but essentially you have all your favorite characters from the original games.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still alive, and at the same time, through time dilation, the Andromeda characters are around as well. So you get people who like Andromeda, they got their Andromeda characters, and they can continue a little bit of the story there. And then you got people who are fans of the original trilogy, and it's kind of the best of both. I don't want the game to be time travel based or multiverse. That would make the story convoluted. But if they can have this time dilation as an excuse to bring back our original characters, that would be a way to bring everyone together, I think.
Time dilation. So do you think that they need to bring the Mass Effect 3 crew, or some of them at least, back into the fold? I mean, because from a get back the fans on board point of view, yeah, it's perfect. I mean, there's a reason why we see Liara, walking up that Reaper, right? Is because they know. And listen, Bioware did this perfectly. I think the strategy that they're going for is genius. It's the right thing to do. You take a break from Andromeda, which you probably didn't really have to do if you wanted to support the game. But you take a break from Andromeda, then you drop Legendary Edition. And you don't just give them a normal HD rise version. You change a few things here and there. So you remind the fans why you love this game and why you love these characters. and then you let them know that, hey, listen, we're working on Mass Effect 4. You show Liara, everyone's excited again, and the buzz is there. And for N7 days, you're dropping these snippets, everyone's getting excited again. It's perfect.
Right.
100% perfect. I'm just wondering, how is that gonna be? Okay, let me put it this way. Do you think the fan base is going to be overall happy if you're bringing back all these characters, or do you think some of them are going to say, "Hey, listen, it's a cop out. Like, we want new characters, we want a new kind of, a new kind of Garrus, a new type of Liara, a new type of Tali, etc., etc."
I think so. I think that's always inevitable. There's going to be fans who prefer to move on. But personally, with Andromeda, moving on didn't, in Bioware's eyes, I don't think it worked from a sales perspective. I think Bioware needs to cater to the OG fans and the Andromeda fans. I think the only way to do that is to bring some of the characters back, and they already showed Liara in the trailer. I don't think Liara alone would be enough. Yeah, it could be nostalgia baiting, but if they can make an interesting plot and a reason and a logical explanation for why they're combining the two universes together, that personally I think would bring more fans together overall.
Yeah, I think you can get away with listen, if you do everybody, I think everyone's gonna be happy. You some kind
Yeah.
of, hey, everyone's gonna be happy to see Tali again and all these guys. I think just from a scientific Mass Effect point of view, you can see the Krogans there. Liara makes sense. The other characters, I mean, even the Geth makes sense. The ones like the Solarians have like the lowest lowest life expectancy. I believe they die like around in the 30s or whatever. So you ain't gonna see more than, I mean,
No.
well, actually, you ain't really gonna see him at all anyway. So yeah, it doesn't matter, right? But yeah, that is an interesting point. I'll just read this from Zagrim. He says, the Leviathan could be part of a group of apex species as part of the founders. So the Reapers imitate the Leviathan species, but there are other founding races and tech. This is a great idea just because and I touched on something similar to this, where the Leviathans are not the first apex race. There could be other races that were before them, and that's when the story can get interesting. So in this idea that I came up with, you meet a Reaper, and he kind of tells you like, "Hey, listen, the Leviathans, just like you guys, were like at the bottom,
Yeah.
and due to some conflict that happened, all these other big major races got wiped out, and Leviathan were left to kind of stand up. Think of it like like the dinosaurs with us,
Right.
the rockheads and the mammals then rise. So something similar could be the story. And then I was saying, well, maybe those races or whatever that whatever happened to them, maybe they're back now, and they're like, yeah, we're here to reclaim the throne, the
That would
Milky
be
Way
cool.
throne.
That would be cool.
That's an option for sure. So which ending would you say is potentially canon? Do you think there's a way that BioWare is gonna incorporate red, blue, and green? Or are you of the opinion, which is my opinion, that you can't do it? The story's gonna be crazy, it's gonna cause problems. Don't even bother. I'm an advocate for destroy.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of benefits there. However, you don't have to make it. If you make it synthesis, cool. Let's stick with synthesis, only synthesis. I don't want destroy and control being incorporated into that, because I don't think you can. So just pick one ending. I don't care if it's mine. Mine will be great, but pick one ending and go through with that, because that's what's gonna that's gonna give us a great story. More importantly, a consistent story.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts?
100%. Yeah, I think the same way. Perfect destroy rather. I think is the ideal starting point for the next game. If they did do all three endings, you're at risk of watering down the story or making it super confusing. If you water it down and simplify everything, then what was the point of the three choices? And if you make it super confusing, you're just letting yourself at risk for massive plot holes. If they pick destroy, you have a great starting point. and you can kind of start fresh. Um, you know, the Reapers are out of the picture, so now you can introduce a new villain with control and synthesis. While it is interesting that the Reapers are still sort of around, I don't know. I mean, it'd be kind of cool, but I don't know how that would work. Would they be
Oh,
like
I
allies?
have I have a theory on that because it was in the in that theory video I made what I was saying that like the Reapers are synthetic and they actually think for themselves, at least some of them.
Hmm.
So you could have a situation where not all Reapers went to go fight in the Battle of Earth. Some of them were like, nah, we ain't about this life. We don't want to do that.
Yeah.
We actually think, killing these organics is quite messed up. So they just did their own thing or whatever. And you meet Reapers who have their own thoughts, like who are, like sentient.
That'd be cool.
And I thought that would be interesting. So I'm not saying like you do missions with them per se, but you kind of like come across them. They're not the big baddies. They're not even bad anymore. Well, they're morally gray. But I think that's a good way to incorporate the Reapers into the story by not really humanizing them, but just saying, because I mean, if we're talking about this idea of the synthetics becoming sentient, then why can't a Reaper fall into that category? Aren't they the same? In fact, don't they have more of a cause to be sentient, as they're actually incorporating organics into themselves?
Yeah. The only thing would be is how much free will do they have with the catalyst kind of running things? Well, it doesn't really matter because if the catalyst is gone, then they would have free will. I still think, by the way, that would work for Destroy because they could be outside of the blast radius and we could see them again, possibly.
Oh, I'm all for Destroy. I think Destroy has to be the correct way to do things, because if any other ending puts you in a situation where the story becomes harder to write. Because now, like if you choose Control and you got Reaper Shepherd with thousands of Reapers around, like what bad guy is going to be around to fight? Really, why doesn't Reaper Shepherd intervene and stop organics from doing certain things? Reaper Shepherd can intervene and stop the Krogans from doing other things. It's just too nice of a story. And synthetics is even synthesis is even worse. Just a real quick one. Diagram says humanity finds the indicators as they find a way to power up the Mars archive that points to another site, older and prime. Yeah, something similar to this as well could be. I think what'll be interesting is how do we incorporate Andromeda into that story, if we're gonna bring Andromeda in. I think that the time dilation points that you raised were good. Oof. I just don't know.
I have another one.
Go ahead.
I have another one. What do you think of this one? I personally am more. I think the time dilation one makes more sense. But what do you think of the idea that the game simultaneously takes place shortly after Mass Effect 3 and during the Andromeda timeline? So there'd be two playable protagonists, and you would play as either Shepard or someone else in the original trilogy timeline. The choices you make in that era somehow have an effect on in the future timeline in Andromeda. And so you basically get both games at the same time for both fans. Personally, I think it's kind of cool, but I also think that it could make the story very confusing, and it could also make the game feel oddly short because it's like half a game, two halves of the game. You know what I mean? So
two different games with two different protagonists, right?
Yeah, and the choices between each timeline, each era, impact each other, or impact the future rather.
That'll be interesting. Actually, I never thought about that like that. But I think the fact that it's going to be two games is that's going to cause an outrage from fans. Like, I got to pay 60 for this and then 60 for part 2.
Oh no! I mean like one game, but there's like flashbacks, and then the choices you make as, say, Shepard would then have an impact on the future. Kind of like the new game Exodus. Have you heard of that? That new
yes,
RPG?
That does look really good as well.
Yeah, kind of like that. The impression I get with that game is you make choices in the past, and then with time dilation you get forwarded into the future and you see how your choices in the past affected the future. Kind of like that, but with Mass Effect.
Yeah, no, the Access looks good, and yeah, I guess that could work. I don't know who make things too complicated, but then again,
Yeah.
like Bioware is in a situation where things will get complicated if they try to incorporate all these endings anyway. So we gotta be a bit more creative in how we bring them together. Um, so I think we're more or less done with the Mass Effect stuff. We can move on
Okay.
to unless there's something else you wanted to bring up that I'm missing.
No, I think we covered everything.
Okay, cool. So then the next talking point will be Starfield. Um, Starfield. I like Starfield. I think it's a good game. I don't think it's a great game. I think Bethesda are great at doing what they do, and it seems like the transition from grounded continental open world didn't transition very well for me. It didn't transition very well to space.
Yeah.
They had a good shot at it. I don't think they executed everything in the way they should. Some things felt somewhat surface level, and some things felt a little bit deeper and better. But they tried. I overall give the game an 8 out of 10. I wanted a 10 out of 10, so I was disappointed. But it wasn't a bad game. But what are your thoughts on the game? Did you like it? Do you think Starfield fulfilled what fans hoped? I mean, fans of sci-fi, fans of Bethesda, and fans of just gaming in general.
I liked the game. I would agree, 7 or 8 for me. It didn't hold my interest as long as I thought.
Just a quick one. I want to quickly
Oh, yeah.
just point out this. Degrim says to finish up his Andromeda points. Andromeda could be brought in as easily as a call from home. Pulse Reaper has a cryo ship or high band message appear in Andromeda type, trying to reconnect or touch base with survivors of the project. This guy knows his sci-fi. It's cool. And he says about Starfield, I had higher hopes for it. Gameplay good, shipbuilding okay, story painful. Story was garbage, but Andrew, go ahead. I agree with you there, Graham.
I enjoyed the game, but it didn't hold my interest as long as I thought it would. I think the problem was a big problem was the planets. There was like nothing to do on the planets, on the bulk of them. Obviously, you had New Atlantis and you had those pre-built planets. I think it was too ambitious for the 1,000 planets. If they had narrowed it down to 10 crafted planets with very diverse and interesting areas to explore, as they did with their older games, in terms of making it handcrafted. I think that would have been better, would have kept people more interested. I mean, I went to a barren planet and I was there for like 3 hours waiting. I was like searching for something to do, and I think pacing wise as well, if they had just streamlined it, it would have held my interest. In terms of story and quests, same here. I think the writing wasn't as strong as their past games, but also Bethesda games haven't always been known for crazy writing. It's mainly been the worlds you explore. So when you kind of don't do the exploration, in my opinion, as right as the older games, then you kind of drop off a lot of fans.
Yeah, that's the problem there, I think. I don't care about exploration. I'm not a Bethesda guy like that. My issue stems with the narrative. As soon as I remember playing the first mission and I'm thinking, this could have been better. You could have written this better. I don't understand why it's like this. Like, this doesn't seem. And I'm thinking, like, whose decision was it to go to Cat to the Cat the first planet you visit?
I forgot the name.
That green ugly planet. I'm like, why?
Right.
Why would you?
First thing I did was mod that out.
I was like, why would you? Who chose this? But like, choose something nice and vibrant that shows the game's graphics and stuff. Like, it was a very weird decision. Well, how about this? Do you think the comparisons of No Man's Sky and Star Citizen, do you think they were justified in comparing it to Starfield? Because what we did see is a lot of people they will make these comparisons. And I would argue that a lot of these games that they're comparing it to have pros and cons.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is they're comparing the pros that they perceive of these games, and they're matching it to Starfield and saying, "Well, so this is why Starfield sucks." But what they don't do is they don't take the cons of those games and match it to Starfield and see where Starfield does better. That's the
Right.
only issue I have with this comparison. But go ahead.
Yeah, so I haven't played No Man's Sky, but I do know about it, and I have played Star Citizen. Um, I think what Starfield has going for it is that technically there's more to do. There's a lot of side quests, factions. Whether or not you like the missions is up to the player, but Star Citizen and No Man's Sky they're really like these sandbox, type games, massive open worlds where you can kind of do whatever you want, quoting Todd Howard here, but in a more free way. I think on the surface level you can argue that they're similar. You mine rocks in Starfield, you mine rocks in Star Citizen, but Starfield at least had more of a jack of all trades. It catered to more players, I think, than Star Citizen and No Man's Sky, which was very for people who really like hardcore, like survival type of games.
Yeah, that's why the comparison doesn't really make sense to me in that aspect. I understand they have certain things and some similarities, but like you said, No Man's Sky is a very different type of game. And I would urge a lot of these guys who, they want to do the comparison to go play No Man's Sky and then see how bored you get very, very fast.
Right.
Even the loading screen situation. Now, I do feel 100% that Starfield was not ready to release. I think there were signs there. Like when I'm going to my ship and it's a loading screen, I'm just thinking, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why is there a loading screen here? It's not a big deal. But then it starts to build up. You start, and then there's some just poor design choices. You're taking off. Okay, fine, loading screen, cool. You want to go to this other solar system, loading screen. I'm thinking, why is this screen cut into black?
Right.
Why are you taking me away from the experience? Like, it doesn't feel like a seamless experience. And that's why when I watch Star Wars Outlaws and I see Kel, I think his name Kel Vestas.
Is it K?
K.
Yeah.
And I see her walk into her ship and she sits down and she just goes and everything just feels like it's a transition. Now, I think that might cause more of a loading screen because obviously it's been hidden. But I guess my question to Bethesda was, why didn't you hide it better? Why did you just do it this way? It's taken away from the experience. And even like this, and I was playing on console and playing the game on 30 frames is very different from 60. It really
100%.
is. And a part of me just feels maybe y'all should have delayed the game probably. No, I think they should have, but I don't know if that actually brings them more sales, more players. It might give them a higher Metacritic rating. I don't think that's going to affect the Game Pass players or not, or the subscribers. So I get why they didn't do it. Yeah, I was disappointed in that. One thing I really did like was the combat. I thought the combat was interesting, fun. I think we should have got more powers earlier. I think the enemies should have been smarter as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a lot of potential there. But once again, even things like the temple runs, getting the powers there, it's the same thing over and over again. Like, why? Who's making this game? Like, who's making these weird ass decisions?
Yeah. I'm in agreement there. Same thing. I agree with the loading screen stuff. I was actually playing Skyrim not too long ago, and I was in a dungeon, and the dungeons don't have loading screens within loading screens. You can open many doors and go on for a good 20 minutes, half hour without a single loading screen, maybe more, probably more, to be honest. There was lots of doors and it was perfectly fine. The pacing was great. But yeah, in Starfield, I felt like there was loading screens in buildings, loading screens within loading screens within loading screens. And it does take you out, even if it's like a second of a quick load, it still takes you out of the game.
Yeah. Doug Grimm says, I'm a nobody and I wrote a better narrative in an hour with Starfield's premise and opening scene. That Bethesda would have used it though. Direction of the studio was very set on a certain vision. Yeah, I said it earlier as well that the first opening I was like, why is it like no, this could be so much better. I have my critiques of Constellation. I have my I have my critiques of the characters as well. I think they did a good job in trying to explore each characters, with the factions. I think they've improved in some aspects. I think Will Shan has, you can see they're trying to incorporate um, certain beats and emotions into their stories, but the writing is just so average that
Yeah.
it doesn't connect at all.
Yeah, I think I've kind of come to expect that with Bethesda games. Like their main quest lines have never stood out to me too much. It's usually the side quests, which were the meat and potatoes, I guess. But even well, what did you think of the side quests? I didn't find them that engaging, but I will say though I haven't gotten through all the factions.
The side quest for me, I thought some of them. I thought the UC side quest was good. It was interesting. Um, I think overall they're okay. Some of them are better than the others for sure.
Yeah.
It might be some of Bethesda's best, maybe. But I can't really vouch for that because I haven't played some not all of their games. I'm close to finishing the side quest with the ecliptic mercy. No, not them. The bad guys, the pirates.
Right.
Is the Ryan is just not good. It's just not that good. It doesn't really
No.
catch your attention. I see improvements. I see that it's good in some aspects, but it's not that level of, oh, this is like Mass Effect side stories where I'm really interested in and engaged. So I will say one thing: if this game was if Bethesda had decided to make, instead of Starfield, and Elder Scrolls or Fallout 5 or Elder Scrolls 6, I think that would have been a much better game. I just don't believe that they were able to transition into sci-fi very, very well. They just can't. Their way of making games just didn't really transition. And I think one company that's doing looks like they might do a really good job at doing it is Ubisoft with Star Wars Outlaws. I think that game looks like they might have nailed it properly. Now, will they have great worlds to visit? Will they have all these characters? No, I think there's going to be pros and cons. Starfield's going to have things that it does better than Star Wars Outlaws, same thing as Star Citizen, same thing as No Man's Sky. They're all going to be different for different reasons. But who gets closest to that seamless that seamless feeling? I think so far, from what I've seen from Ubisoft, it seems like they might execute that really well.
Yeah, it's possible.
But what are your thoughts on well, okay, well, hold on, actually, before we move on to Star Wars, you mentioned that you felt Starfield was probably too ambitious for its own good. I can see that. The creation engine, do you think that's going to be what I don't want to say save the game, because the game is doing okay, but do you think that's what's going to take the game to the next level? Because the Grim here says Starfield was made better by modding out the temple minigame. Just step into the ring, boom, done. And he's right. Modding is what's going to bring people back. But do you think it really kind of takes it to that next step?
I think so. I think the creation engine has its pros and cons. It seems, and I don't know if it's just the way they're developing the game, just design choices, or if it's the game engine limitations, but a lot of Bethesda games, they feel the same. Like, but Fallout 4, I was always saying, feels like Starfield is just Fallout 4 in space, or Skyrim in space. They kind of all have that same vibe. The way when you talk to characters, the camera just zooms in on them. There's no cinematic cutscenes like you'd get in Mass Effect. And I don't know if that's just an engine limitation or their own creative style, but I will say modding tends to save Bethesda games for years, but it depends on the initial foundation. Is the initial foundation interesting enough for modders to want to create mods and expand on the universe. Um, I know I've heard Starfield modders, some have backed out because they just weren't as interested in it, and they went back to mod the older games.
Mhm.
Um, so we'll have to see. I think time will tell. But in terms of modding, yes, tends to help Bethesda games a lot. In terms of game engine, developing the game, maybe it would be time to move on to a new engine.
Yeah. Um, I'm not an engine expert, so I'll refrain from from commenting on that. But I have heard similar takes. People have felt that the engine is holding them back. Some people have said it's not the engine's fault, but it's the tools. I'm not too sure on it, so
Mhm.
I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
And finally, the last topic is Star Wars Outlaws. I'll say I think this game looks interesting. I think it looks great. I think it looks fun. I love the fact that like I mentioned to you earlier, she just walks into her ship and just sits down and just she's off. I think it's great. The combat is anything I'm a bit iffy on.
Mhm.
Um, the gunplay looks okay. Using your little pet dog is okay. But that's about it. That's my only real critique of the game. Well, actually, two critiques. That, and I don't know if the story is gonna be interesting either.
Right.
You didn't get this vibe of like, oh, I'm gonna really enjoy this story. It just seemed like it's gonna be like your typical kind of okay Star Wars. Some betrayals here and there. That's about it. So
Yeah.
I am a bit wary about that. But overall, the game looks good, and I'm gonna likely purchase it. How about you?
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna play the game. I think it does look good visually. Like the worlds look very authentic to Star Wars. Very, dirty looking, old, retro, and I think they got the aesthetics done really well. The graphics are great, and the gameplay looks decent. I think it's hard to tell unless you're actually playing it, but my concern is there enough weapons, enough abilities that'll keep the player interested in progressing? Are there skills you can level up your character, or is it just kind of a straightforward um, shooter, like cover shooter, basically with a plot, an open world plot? Um, so in terms of that sense, yeah, I agree with you. The combat looks kind of standard, um, but I do think the game looks interesting as well.
Yeah. How about the ship combat? It looked a bit streamlined and easier
Yeah.
than it was for Starfield with me. But once again, I can't really comment on that. Like I think I need to have it in my hands. But it did look easier and a bit more fun than what I expected.
Yeah, the ship combat, like I'm not much of a ship combat person, but it kind of reminded me of like Battlefront 2's ship combat, like pretty straightforward. I'm not sure how much of it is in the game, but I don't mind it. It won't bother me, but I wouldn't say I'm like excited for it. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah. Do you think that do you think the idea to restrict the use of like the force or a lightsaber might hurt the game? Do you think that's something that probably could have been in the game and would have made the game more interesting? Or are you happy that we're stepping away from Jedi's again and now we're kind of just focusing on the universe?
hmm Um, I think with the Jedi Survivor games, people kind of already got that itch of playing as a Jedi. It is cool to imagine, oh, I'm going to be a Jedi in this massive open world. But it doesn't bother me as long as it's executed well. Is the
Mhm.
character going to have cool abilities, stuff to keep players into it? Also, is the character interesting? Cool in their own way. So I think they can make it work. Just being a normal smuggler. I would have preferred probably being like a Mandalorian or something, like a bounty hunter. That'd be pretty
Yeah.
cool. But we'll see how it goes. We'll see how they execute it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I just wish the gameplay kind of captured me a little bit more, but I will play it. I think this might be the first year where I buy two Ubisoft games because Star Wars Outlaws looks good and Assassin's Creed looks good as well. So those two games I'm probably going to purchase.
Yep, same here.
So I'm thinking, did I have any other questions in relation to Star Wars? No, I think that's kind of it. We kind of her rider, her little car. Or I don't know what to call it. I mean, you're the Star Wars guy. Like what?
Oh, the
What
speeder?
speeder? Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That looks
That looks
cool.
fun. Yeah, it looks fun. It looks cool.
I like how when you're going over the water, it's like rippling. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Just
No,
nice effects.
are you worried that if we're using the speeder, that then it means we're going to be in a situation where the world is going to be a bit more barren?
Yeah, that's my concern. Ubisoft games tend to have that formula. You know, you see it in some of like the Far Cry games and some of the. It's either here's the problem with Ubisoft games. It's either barren or it's bloated. There's no in between. Like Assassin's Creed, some of them can be very bloated. There's like you look at the map and there's 100,000 icons everywhere, and then you look at like another game, maybe a Far Cry, and you'll be walking for a while before you can get to the next enemy base or something. I hope Outlaws can really work on that and make it, you know, not too overwhelming for the player, not too empty. The speeder might help with pacing. Maybe you can get from point A to point B faster. Maybe there's fast travel. There seems to be large stretches of desert. So is there going to be stuff you can stop, take a pit stop, and loot? I don't know. I hope so. I hope there's some interesting things to do on the way.
Yeah. That's about it in terms of questions that I have for you. Listen, Andrew, thanks for coming through. Had a great time talking, everything in sci-fi. We'll probably do this again next week or so if you're interested.
Yeah.
That's when any interesting news also pops out. And Grim, thanks for coming through. He mentions he thinks Bethesda will attempt an Unreal/Creation hybrid engine. I don't know anything about engines. I don't know if that's possible, but I'll take his word for it.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, take the best parts from Unreal Engine and the best parts from Creation Engine, and because I have to say, like, this in Starfield, you can drop something somewhere and it has its dimensions, and you could just leave it there, and you could go back and it's there. There's a lot of things it does really well, and the Creation Engine allows you to do these things. So I understand why Bethesda likes it. I think I read somewhere that the reason why they haven't really updated is because everyone knows a Creation Engine, and for them to choose a different game, a different engine, it's going to take resources. Everyone has to now learn all over again, Unreal, and that's going to slow down time. And in this mindset of we need to get games out as fast as possible, we want to do Fallout, we want to do Elder Scrolls, and we want to work on Starfield content. We probably don't have time to be learning new tools, especially when Epic is going to be taking like 10% cut or 15% cut of that profit. You're thinking, man, screw Epic,
right?
So right. I get it. I get why they want to use their own engine, but if it's causing problems, then you gotta make that transition. That's what CDPR did with the Red Engine. It caused all problems with Cyberpunk, and eventually they said, yeah, we're just gonna use Unreal now because it's just gonna make our life a lot easier. Listen, again, Andrew, thanks for coming through.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming through as well. And anyone else watching this, thank you. I'll leave Andrew's channel in the description so you guys can check out his content.
Appreciate it.
Really well animated videos. You love it. I love them. They're great.
Thank you.
Again, everyone, ciao now.
Have a good one.